right, howdy and welcome to another episode of the Mike Sennello Show. Tonight's episode is going to be very different because, well, for two reasons, we're going to do things completely different from how we normally do it. And the first thing that's going to make this one completely different is that we're going to do this without notes. I've got some links up here that I might share, but normally what I do is on this screen I have a notepad file out with all my notes for the show, so I have everything prepped, I have my thoughts organized, I have an order to things, but we're not going to really be needing that because what I want to do is actually give a much more, let's call it live reaction, a much more in-the-moment reaction to this, which is a video I just released today. You guys have seen it on, I forget who else's channel. There's the First Lady who speaks during this public comment. Put it out on her YouTube channel. This is the public comment from the New Milford Board of Education's February 21st, 2023 meeting regarding Schaghticoke Middle School. And although you guys may have seen it, it is on my channel right now. And in fact, so you guys can follow along. Why not? I will drop... okay, I guess I don't have that video here. All right, well, anyways, it's on there. All you have to do is go to my channel and it's the first video that'll be on there that isn't a live video, so you can follow along if you'd like. A link, if you're watching on Facebook, to my YouTube channel is in this video's description, so you can hop over there if you'd like to check this out. All we're going to be doing tonight is a watch party, a live reaction to what took place here. And in this video, what I've done is I've cleaned up the audio, I've synced up done a resyncing of the audio, I've remastered the thing in terms of how the audio has been mastered, and I touched up some of the coloring so that it's a bit more ergonomic of a viewing experience. And the other reason that that this is going to be something of a special episode is that this may wind up being the last episode of this show ever. And when I say ever, I really do mean ever. And there's a reason for that. And that is that over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've been kind of totally immersed in politics in a way that is tough for people, for me to describe. I know that there's not going to be that many people watching live, but I also know from the number of people, 3 people just last week, that come up to me that I've never met before, but who has said, Mike, I've seen your show and I love it. I know that you guys are watching this at home, at least after the fact. And I got to tell you, what I have to do to get my head in the game for these shows when they're live is to psych myself out. And what that usually means is basically making sure that I'm going over material that's going to purposely piss me off. And honestly, that's something of a miserable experience. A lot of people have reached out to me over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Mike, what's going on in this area? Mike, what do you think about this? Hey, Mike, I heard this. Can you confirm whether or not that's true? And I'm totally happy to answer the questions to the best of my abilities, but especially with the joint budget hearings having taken up so much of my time, and especially with last Thursday night's joint budget hearing, which we're not going to talk about on this show. Deal with it. We're just not going to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. If you guys want to, I suppose I could give like a 5-minute rant about the length of the meeting. But other than that, I really don't want to get into it. And that's kind of taken a lot out of me. And at this point, like I can't live like this. I can't constantly be just like sinking myself into a pool of Mike being pissed off. So, we're going to go over this thing in great detail as to the best of my abilities. And that's going to mean that tonight's show is going to run way over. So we're not going to have everything wrapped up by 8 o'clock like we normally try to. It's probably not going to be even close. So if you guys want to hang out for the whole thing, enjoy. But we're going to start off with just a few things before we get started here. First things first, a link is in this video's description and link is on the screen for you guys to join in the Discord. There was at least one person who said she might be joining in to have this conversation on Discord. Happy to have your thoughts. I'm going to drop the Discord invite link right now into the comments section so you guys can join in if you'd like to. I'll try my best, since this is going to be kind of a different show, to answer your questions in Q&A as we go. I see Paul Murphy's watching. Thank you, Paul. Holly Cohen-Newman watching. P.S. I'm the first woman who spoke in this video. Yeah, it was tough because I wanted to put like timestamps into my version of the video, but it was tough sometimes to make out exactly how to spell folks' names and stuff. So Holly, thanks for tuning in. And we're going to get into that just momentarily. And again, Holly, I think, was the one who posted the original clip of this public commentary that everybody's been seeing. I uploaded it again to my channel because what I did was I cleaned everything up so that you guys can have a more ergonomic viewing experience for the future. So if you guys want to check that out on my channel too, that's cool. If you want to check it out on Holly's channel too, I'm sure Holly can put her channel into commentary since he's watching on Facebook. We are testing out some extremely ultra low latency, whatever that means, on YouTube, which probably means about 3 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and just check the Discord channel, see if anyone else is there. If you guys want to join in via call, and then log into the Discord server and jump into the general voice chat, and I'll pull you in. I'll try to duck my head into that every few minutes just to see if anyone else is in there watching that. Now, the last thing that we're going to do before we get into this video, because I know that the title of this video, the live stream that you're watching right now, is I Told You So. There's a reason it's framed that way. And that's not because I'm trying to be vitriolic up front. It's because this is my response. This is the response to the treatment I got many years ago when I laid down, at the Board of Finance public hearing for the joint budget hearings many years ago, we had a jam-packed Sarah Noble Intermediate School. And what I did was I was the first one to speak, and I rolled up a hand truck full of studies, reports, etc. A hand truck, 4 feet tall, a stack of paper 4 feet tall, and handed copies of each of these studies and reports to the Board of Finance. And in those 3 minutes, basically summarized everything that we're going to be talking about tonight. So no, I'm not going to be providing links. No, I'm not going to be citing sources because we beat this thing to death years ago. And what I did, in those 3 minutes, I said some things that, folks, you're not going to like. And there are going to be some things tonight that you're going to hear that you're not going to like, but the facts are the facts are the facts are the facts. End of story. And, you know, if those might be hard pills to swallow, but we're living in the world called reality, and that's just what we're going to have to deal with. Now, I did, on my way out to Tennessee, put together this video, which we're probably going to wind up watching tonight. It's called The Truth About Spending in Public Schools, What Works and What Doesn't. So that's on my channel as well. If you just simply search School and Truth, I've got a link I can drop a link if you guys want me to. Let me know in the comment section if you want me to go through this. It's 21 minutes long, and we are overflowing with sources and citations in that video that go over everything I said and as condensed a detail as possible. But everything that I said in that meeting has revealed itself to be undeniably true at this point. Everyone at home that saw that video, that saw that public comment, everyone that made that public comment, by the way, kudos to anyone who has the guts to go before the Board of Education and speak at public comment with any degree of honesty, because that is a very difficult thing to do. Kudos to everyone in the room who knows that you have a certain limitation on how much you can speak. Public comment is limited to 5 minutes typically at these Board of Education meetings. And so a special kudos to those people that wrote out what they were going to speak, what they were going to say, so that we could just get right into it. And so that you don't have to worry about going over your time limits. That's the right way to go about this. But what I was met with after that 3 minutes, it was an eerie experience, because there must have been 200 to 300 people in that room, probably around 240, 250 people in that Sarah Noble Intermediate School cafeteria / auditorium. And when I turned around, everyone in the room was so gobsmacked and visibly irate that the room fell silent. You could hear an absolute pin drop in a room that was murmuring. I was ready to explode before I got up on there, and I silenced the entire room. And what I was met with when it came to the commentary that I offered and the endless amount of sources that I cited was, no, Mike, you're just wrong. You're an idiot. You're a fool. At the further extreme of that was, don't you care about the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Mike, God, you're basically, it was met with, you're evil because you don't care about kids. And everything that I said is something we're going to be going over tonight, because at this point it's undeniably true. And undeniably in the sense that even you guys have finally come to grips with the reality on the ground in the matter. So if you guys want me to go over that, we'll go over that. We're probably going to have to anyways. I'm probably going to have to just sit through that meeting, because are you on board or are you not on board? And the reason that this video has been titled the way it has is because I've got so much to say that I've already said and that you guys have jumped down my throat for, that this is the response you're going to get. If these are the rules you're going to set for the game that we're going to play, and I play by those rules, then you've got no room to complain. So, with that said, this is going to be hard for folks to watch. First things first. This is going to be incredibly hard for folks to watch, even without my commentary. So be forewarned that there's kind of a lot going on here. So now you have your warning. Let's get into Holly's commentary. She's first up.
First person is Holly Newman. Name and address. My name is Holly Newman. My address is 19 Round Table Road. I have a daughter who is a junior at New Milford High School, and this is my son, Joshua. He's in 8th grade. Joshua and I have discussed what I'm here to talk about. Joshua was a 7th grader at Schaghticoke Middle School during the 21-22 school year. He was bullied verbally and physically the entire year. He was stabbed with a pencil, smacked in the head, pushed down the stairs, shoved into walls, and repeatedly told to kill himself by students in his class. Much of this was caught on video. What did the school do? What were the consequences? The boy who attacked him on the stairs was suspended for a few days. And let's not forget restorative conversation.
Oh my God.
That student came back more motivated and now aware of where cameras were, so he knew where and when to attack. At a school-sponsored dance, in which the students had to register to attend, that student showed up unregistered with the intent to hurt my child. Several students reported this and told us there were texts to back up their claims. Thankfully, the PTO president did not let that student in. She reported the incident to the school. The school's response? They couldn't do anything because the dance was at the max and not on school property. When Joshua reported being repeatedly told to kill himself again, restorative conversation was the suggestion. Joshua developed chronic headaches, stomach aches, and he was afraid to go to school. Each time Josh reported the attack, verbal or physical, it was Joshua who had to adjust. It was suggested that Joshua have an adult escort him in the halls. He didn't want this to happen. So instead it was advised that he leave class 3 minutes early so that he would be alone in the hallways and not available to the bullies. After it all became too much for him, he told a friend that he planned to kill himself. Thankfully, she told her guidance counselor, who called me, and we called 211. The 211 therapist shared that Joshua made it very clear he had begun having these thoughts as a result of being bullied at school. She told my husband and I, if it were her son, she'd remove him from SMS immediately. We brought him home. We gave him a few days to adjust while we adjusted his class schedules and hopefully tried to separate him from the students that were bullying him. Once he returned, he was punched in the head, unprovoked, while walking down the hall. This too was caught on video. That student received a whole day suspension and, of course, restorative conversation. In November, we pulled Josh from school on a medical leave of absence due to his declining mental health. Josh returned in January with yet another schedule adjustment that allowed him to leave school at 12:30. To make it very clear, the consistent solution to my son being bullied at school was to alter his schedule at the expense of his education. This continued for the rest of the year. Even with the shortened day, Joshua was bullied physically and verbally daily. Joshua is currently attending a different school at my expense. Bullying is simply not tolerated in that school. The students know it's not tolerated. The school emphasizes community, clear expectations, and consequences are given. Schaghticoke Middle School and New Milford schools failed Joshua, and as you will hear, it's currently failing its students today. This district needs to do better, Our children's lives depend on it.
All right. Well, Holly, that was really gutsy of you to go up to the podium and reveal that. Now, here's a huge caveat we have to make. Everything that everyone's going to say in this video in terms of public comment, we're going to pretend we're just going to accept it's true. If it's untrue, then we can revisit this. But we're going to accept that everything that Holly just said is 100% true. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but when a teacher at Schaghticoke Middle School with all of those problems, if all of this is true, tells you to find another school, the answer is you should. Take them at their word. And I'll start with all of this. This is something I said years ago, and you guys all ridiculed me for saying this. The single biggest predictor for educational outcomes is parental involvement. You can't get more parental involvement than what you get when it comes to things like homeschooling. What happens outside the four walls of the classroom in the home accounts for something like 80 to 90% of the educational outcomes, depending on which of the sources you'd like to cite over the last 60 plus years of research on this matter that have all concluded the exact same thing. You all know what's going on. You all know everyone knows what's going on with Holly. She described one kid, one bad apple. We all know what's going on here, which is that first part that you're not going to like, this is an age-related thing. This is absolutely an age-related thing. Schaghticoke Middle School, I went to Schaghticoke Middle School. God knows how many decades ago. In the mid to late 1990s, I went to Schaghticoke Middle School. Most of you folks watching at home went to Schaghticoke Middle School. That is an age cohort of kids that are, excuse the language, but little damn bastards. And that's especially, well, it's not especially true of the boys. It's more that the boys' curve is like flatter. So at the extremes, it's going to be all boys, right? So what you wind up with is when it comes to those 6 or 7 most rotten kids, you can't have them in the system. Kids are not better behaved than they were when I was in Schaghticoke Middle School, and they're not necessarily that much worse than they were when I was in high school. I could name names. I don't like to disparage people's character on this show. I could name names. The difference is that in the mid to late 90s, we had mechanisms for dealing with these kids. First things first, they were deal breakers. They were deal breakers where it was immediate expulsion, no chance for appeal. See you later. You're not ever allowed back into New Milford Public Schools, period. We had those kids. We had this thing in the mid to late 90s called juvenile hall. And kids were sent there. And you could go to court. You could go to criminal court and the judge could sentence you to a 2 to 3 year stay at juvenile hall. This was a real thing. It was so well known, we had a shorthand for it called juvie. And when it comes to physically torturing other kids, you can't have these kids in the mix. Restorative justice rejects that idea. Restorative justice isn't justice. So this is unfortunately a policy that we've adopted over many, many years based on the philosophy that what you should do when somebody does something horribly wrong isn't demand that they serve a penance, but prove to us that you're not going to do it again. Prove to us that you've been reformed. If that's the case, then you don't have the 2 to 3 year sentence. You could have a 2 to 3 hour sentence if somebody could magically somehow be restored to what they were, to restore the program. And we all know, too, what's happening in this situation, too, isn't the result of what's happening in the classroom in the first place. We all know that these 6 or 7 worst kids in the school have no hope. A 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, because this is the age group we're talking about. These aren't adults that are making conscious decisions or have had decades upon decades upon decades to make these conscious decisions. We're talking about 10, 11, and 12, and sometimes 13-year-old kids, mostly boys, right? And at that age group, at that age, everything that they do in terms of their behavior and especially misbehavior is coming from the home. We all know that those 6 or 7 kids that are the most rotten kids in the system don't have a chance because it has to get fixed in that rotten home life. And we all know the school can't do anything about that. And since the school can't do anything about that, the solution 30 years ago was to say, well, then they have to be out of the system. Period. You can't have these kids intermingled into the system. And let me tell you, because I was in Schaghticoke once. I was in middle school once. I was 10, 11, 12 years old once. I got served out-of-school suspensions. Do you know what out-of-school suspensions are for a 10 or a 11 or a 12-year-old boy that's getting served these suspensions in the first place? It is recess. It is recess. You're telling me not only do I not have to go to school, you're telling me specifically not to go to school for a day or two? Woohoo! Break out the sleds. We're going sledding. Back when we used to have snow in this town. It was in-school suspension that kids hated. And what you're doing with in-school suspension is isolating the kids. In-school suspension used to suck. And that was what the kids that were problem kids, that was what they feared. That was the thing that they feared, was being put into a chamber against their will, which is what juvenile hall is. And again, restorative justice, and I'm going to say something that, again, folks are not going to like. Look into social emotional learning, because social emotional learning is built on the same philosophy that like there's no such thing as just human beings being different from each other. Human beings aren't ants. And some human beings are different from other human beings. Some human beings are going to go into the classroom with far greater aptitude and far greater capacity to learn and to adapt to new situations than other students. And some students are going to be in that far less category. Some students are going to be incredibly well-behaved and obedient. And some kids are going to be major problems, right? Some kids may be the class clown and maybe getting detention for purposely showing up late to class every day for a week because I didn't want to go to class, so I just took my sweet-ass time getting to the science wing. Right? Or for mouthing off at the teachers. But that's completely different from beating the hell out of another student. That's completely different from, slapping the crap out of a teacher. These are the things that you just got to go, right? And no amount of suspension is going to fix this. And quite frankly, bringing a kid at that age group, who's that type of kid, into a hearing to tell them how can we fix this, that's going to be, at best, hyper counterproductive. You make these decisions because they are the right decisions no matter what. You do what is good and right because it is good and right. You don't need the kid involved in that. As a school system, as the principal, you say, no, this is the penance you have to serve. End of story. End of story. We're not saying that you need to be fixed. We're not sending you to rehab. No, we're saying you can't be in our system. You have to be removed. And I'm sorry, but like, Holly, I really feel sympathy for you. If this is all true, man, do I feel sympathy for you. First things first, this is what restorative justice preaches. Why should your kid have to change? Your kid is the one that's getting the crap kicked out of him, and he's the one that has to make changes to his life? Come on. What did I say at the very beginning? Restorative justice is not justice. Holly's son, if he's the one getting his ass kicked, should not have to do anything in order for justice to be served, other than report the thing. That's it. You know what the response is going to be of these kids. I was a little bastard once. I was a little 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy. You pull me into a room and give me a lecture about what I'm supposed to do differently. That kid is getting beat even harder than he was beat before. Like, of course this is going to be the response. Kids aren't adults. This is why they don't have certain privileges that we afford to them. This is why the 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds don't vote. It's because you don't want them to. This is why there are a lot of things 10 and 12-year-olds aren't allowed to do. You don't have them serve in the military. You are a derelict parent if you're letting your kid get drunk at 10, 11, 12 years old. You are a derelict parent if you're letting your kid smoke pot at 10, 11, 12 years old. And this is coming from the crazy libertarian in the room that has no problem with adults going out and getting, blasted out of their minds on just about anything. You want to smoke? If it's Saturday night and you want to smoke yourself retarded, go ahead. You're an adult. You can make those decisions. But 10 and 12-year-olds can't do that. Human beings are different. We're not ants. And restorative justice necessarily, axiomatically rejects that notion. And it's those same notions upon which social emotional learning has been developed. And quite frankly, again, these are problems that are necessarily not going to get fixed in system. What you're asking for these problems to get fixed in system is a market response to a market influence. In an area where you have a public schooling system that is necessarily shielded from those market influences. You don't have a market system. And the only way to create something of a market system so that there is some influence to that is to pull your kids out of public school. We're going to say this again throughout the night, but Holly has demonstrated the best argument I've ever seen for the issuance of vouchers. I texted a friend we're going to see throughout the night. This doesn't get better. This gets worse. But I texted a friend in response to all this who's got 2 kids that are of school age. They're fairly young, so they're going to be in system for a while. And a third kid that's only 1 year away from being of school age. And right now, our budget, it was revealed Thursday night, our budget is set. It could be amended at deliberations next Thursday night. Right? It could be amended at the Board of Finance's deliberations on the 29th. But right now, we're set to spend just under $20,000 per student at New Milford Public Schools. If you had 3 kids of school age, I asked him if all 3 of your kids were of school age, and you got that almost $20,000 per student, which is almost $60,000, let's say after taxes, would your kids ever set foot in New Milford Public Schools? And his response was one word: no. And it was an immediate response. No hesitation, no. I mean, that tells you everything. Here's the thing. If there is all of this outcry and nobody's responding with their feet, then where is the market influence? Right? If we had a market system here in New Milford where there wasn't, let's say there wasn't any taxes, right? And everyone was just going to private schools, and there was internal grant making to make that happen. By the way, this happens in places like Savannah, Georgia, where the system is so bad that everyone goes out of their way to find a way to get their kids into private schools, and therefore there's like 13 or 14 private elementary schools that account for something like 85 to 90% of the student body, right? There you have something closer to a market system, and within the private schooling system, it's actually a huge improvement over what happens in public schools there. Of course, down there, virtually everyone has the median home life in Savannah, Georgia, in those public schools is 10 times worse than the worst home life here. So take that under consideration and take that with a grain of salt. But the only way to create a market system, the only way for them to respond to these influences in a way that's going to actually be a response to these influences is if there's something that's tied to that, if there's some sort of skin in the game that gets removed when they don't respond to these influences. If Taylor's, the local hardware store, doesn't provide the service and goods at a price that you guys can tolerate and at a quality that you guys can tolerate, they go out of business. And what you're left behind with are only the hardware stores that can meet that demand. If you have a situation where it's the beginning of COVID and everyone is screaming to get their hands on alcohol just for sanitary reasons, then Taylor's goes out of its way, like it did, to find some way to get their hands on sanitizing gel or sanitizing lotion, something that has rubbing alcohol in it. That may even mean taking what you have in terms of the rubbing alcohol and just finding smaller containers and pouring into the smaller containers so that you have like travel-sized containers. What's being demanded here is a market response to a market influence. And at the end of the day, the difference between the private sector and government, at the end of the day, is the gun. At the end of the day, what happens if you don't give your money to Taylor's? Taylor's goes out of business, you find another hardware store. At the end of the day, if you don't give your money to the tax collector, what happens? You go to prison. You carry that thing down to its logical end, you're in prison. You're in jail. And if you put up a fight when the cops show up, I mean, they're going to have to use force, and that could turn into deadly force depending on how much of a fight you put up. There's necessarily not going to come from all of this a solution from the public system. And by the way, we already know, we can go through the economics just from what Holly said. She is so fed up with the public schooling system that she's not only pulled her kid out of it, she's found another system that she's paying out of her pocket to go to. Which means she's paying taxes here in New Milford and then not using it on the other side of it, even though she has the opportunity to. That right there tells you right off the bat, that we're not dealing with something that's going to get resolved in public schools. I said it before. Teachers at private schools get paid significantly less on average than their public school cohorts. And they're necessarily producing a better product because you wouldn't send your kid there. You wouldn't pay those taxes and then also pay however many tens of thousands of dollars in tuition if it wasn't obviously better. You wouldn't pay tens of thousands of dollars if the difference wasn't so obvious that we don't even need to cite sources. So obvious that it's visible. And again, you've just made the argument for vouchers. You've just made the argument for homeschooling. This is a huge part of why homeschooling is exploding in this state. I believe in the first year of COVID, homeschooling enrollment increased by something like 10 to 15 fold and just a little bit less in the year afterwards. And that is that when you had the kids at home and the parents were forced to see them at home and forced to see what was going on in the classroom for the first time ever, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of parents here in Connecticut said, no more. No more. And this is not a shot across the bow at the Board of Education. Because this isn't necessarily the fault of New Milford Public Schools. This isn't necessarily the fault of the New Milford Board of Education. This is just what's axiomatically built into the economics of public schooling. I mean, here's a response that I would love to give to folks throughout the course of this night, because you're going to hear this too. Why are phones in the classroom? These are 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. I'm sorry, but in the late 1990s, every teacher, if that technology existed in the late 1990s, every teacher would have had a basket in the front, and you wouldn't have been allowed to sit down until you put your phone in the basket. And if you didn't want to put your phone in the basket, you go straight to the principal's office. Best of luck. And the principal's going to take back then the principal would have taken your phone from you, put it in his basket, and sent you back to class, or just kicked you out, or called your parents and said, you got to come pick him up. He's not allowed. Phones aren't allowed. There is no reason whatsoever for a 10 or 11, 12-year-old to have a cell phone on them at any time of the day. What is such an emergency that you would need to call your 10 or 11, 12-year-old directly and skip the office? What is such an emergency that you would need that? Where it wouldn't be such a serious situation that everybody knows is taking place. What is the serious situation, the serious emergency that 10, 11, 12-year-old needs to use the cell phone in the middle of class to make an outbound call? I hate to say it, but the answer is a school shooting. But in that circumstance, if that's the case, yeah, of course the teacher is going to immediately dole out the phones and lock the room. And then if there's a window, escort the kids out the window as they run across the field to safety. But but you can't do that today. You can't do that today. You're going to get sued as a school system if that's the case. And we're going to talk about this later on, but virtually everything that, I guarantee you, virtually everything that would make sense in system to resolve this is something that's either a contractual obligation, a union negotiated bargaining chip, or some sort of outside agreement with some sort of third party, or some sort of demand from the state, through either the Department of Health and Human Services or through most likely Department of Education. And here's what my response is going to be. If fixing the problem this serious means telling the state, Bafangul, you know what's going to happen. Two things. Number one, the state's going to come in and say, all right, well then you don't get your grants. And for the first time ever, all you have to do is pitch to the public. Listen, we're not going to get these grants. It's going to mean paying more in taxes. Everyone would be on board. If that's what it meant, if we had to pay more money into taxes for you guys to fix these problems, everyone would be on board. It's not like the normal budget. which we've beaten to death here. Everyone would be on board if that was the rationale for saying for that huge increase in tax rates here in New Milford. Everyone would be on board. And the other half of that is the other response. First things first, that's just like extortion from the state. So no, you don't negotiate with terrorists. That's just extortion. So yes, I would love to have people in the system that have the balls to tell the state to buzz off. We're going to do the things that we need to do. End of story. Deal with it. We know here in New Milford what best serves the students here in New Milford, just like you in your home know what best serves your children better than anyone else. This is called devolution. And this is what vouchers allow. It's what homeschooling does. It's what produces universally better outcomes. The state then, of course, is going to come back to us and tell us, well, we're going to pull your accreditation. Let them. We'll find private accreditation. And what we're going to do then is build a public school system that's going to be so much better than everyone else around us, where we're not going to be held hostage by the state's extortive grant program. That what we're going to then do is get requests from places like Brookfield, Danbury, Newtown, out of New Fairfield. Can we send our kids to your system? Your system is clearly so much better that we're willing to pay taxes in Danbury and not make use of it on the other end and send our kids to Milford Public Schools. And then if that's the case, if you're willing to pay tuition, come on up. We'll vet you for behavioral problems and then come on up. And if your kid turns out to be a problem, bye-bye. Bye-bye. We've got other students to deal with. And what's wild about this is what people are going to say is, well, Mike, then if it's just covering costs, why do you have to just cover costs? If they're willing to pay $30,000 a year for what's going to be a much better program by that time, let them. And then you know what's wild? What's wild is if you get enough of those students paying those bills, you don't have to tax the New Milford residents. You don't have to tax them for that. You have tuition being paid at market rates from outside students. That, by the way, crossing a town line to get into another town's schooling system is virtually impossible in the state. It's not impossible, but it's the next closest thing. And that's what this would allow for. It would allow for things like school choice, which is what vouchers allow for. And with that school choice, you have necessarily greater parental involvement in your child's education. And what did I say at the very beginning? The single biggest predictor for educational outcomes is parental involvement. And it's not even close. And we're going to talk more about that as the evening continues on with this public commentary, which, by the way, again, folks, fair warning. As brutal as it was to watch Holly's commentary, it gets worse.
Thank you, Holly and Josh.
Tracy Rusil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tracy Rusil, Ruscil, 2 Rustic Hill Lane. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Rusil. I have 3 kids.
All right, Tracy, before you get started, we got some commentary here. Holly, it was a 2-on-1 counselor, not a teacher, that I guess she's saying told her to find another school. But your point still stands. My apologies. I will make that as I make that correction right now. 2-1 was a counselor, not a teacher, which is why we took him out. Okay, I'm not sure what that's in response to. Paul Murphy, shame parent has to pay to have their child go to a school out of the district while paying taxes for this town school budget. Damn straight. Holly responding to Paul, agreed, but I truly believe it was my only option, and removing him from SMS literally saved his life. This is speaking to exactly the points that I've been making. Pat Erickson, I was in touch with Holly all last year regarding what Josh was being put through. She left out they even had him try half days. Poor Josh was so depressed and the system failed this family because it necessarily did. Right? Like, this is what restorative justice programs necessarily do. You can't have them. You can't have justice and have restorative justice. So now I have to pay over $14,000 a year to keep their son safe while the bully gets free education in our system. This is so wrong. Yeah, no kidding. And one of the easiest responses to that, one of the easiest fixes to that, Holly, would be for you to have that money. For you to have that $19,700 or whatever the heck it is that we're paying per student. If you're going to pull your kid out of the system, what matters is that the kid gets educated. And if that's supposed to be some sort of public good, some sort of common good, then that money should go to the parent to make sure that happens. If what we care about is educating the students and this is what it takes, then this is what it takes. And this is why every place that this has been tested, you've seen improved outcomes. This is so wrong. Yes, it is. Our system needs to pay Josh's tuition. That's what vouchers would be. That's what vouchers would be. They are fortunate they didn't have a high lawsuit. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Schaghticoke is a public school, and they don't have these issues. My grandson went there for 7 years to keep him out of New Milford school system, although his parents pay taxes here every year. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. And Pat, like, you have to know that this is because the home lives of the kids that go to Schaghticoke, those home lives are much better than the home lives of the worst apples here in New Milford. We all know it. Again, I don't have to cite my sources on this one. Anyways, let's get back to the public commentary.
Kids in the New Milford School District, a daughter that's a freshman, and twin 7th graders at Schaghticoke. My sons, AJ and Garrett, are autistic, and they are unable to self-report bullying. In May of last year, a kid on the bus took a picture of one of my sons with his pants down. Another kid on the bus reported it to his parents, and in turn, they reported it to the school. The school did not report it to me. I was not informed of the incident until November, 6 months later. That is because another incident occurred. And I think...
Okay, so before she goes on any further, I really want to highlight this point. That apparently the school knew about this and didn't tell her. Keep that in mind.
Maybe it was the next incident, because I don't know how many incidents there are, because my kids are unable to tell me. So in November, the following messages were airdropped by a student into the phones of other students on the bus. You're more autistic and ugly looking than AJ, even the bus driver. You're dirty as shit. Blank is an N-word, and so is blank.
Okay, just so you folks know, whenever people say a public commentary, I'm not bleeping it. So there may be some swear words on tonight's show.
And AJ and Garrett and the bus driver. Blank is a monkey. Those are just some of the airdrops. If you're not sure what an airdrop is, I'll tell you later, because I don't want to take up time explaining it, but it pops up on your phone. So I learned about this incident from my daughter, who received a screenshot of it, of the horrible things said about her brothers from one of her friends. I did not learn about it from the school. When it happened, I was contacted by the parent who had originally reported the incident of my son being photographed. So she thought the school had contacted me about it and did not say anything to me, but they hadn't. Hearing it from her was when I learned about it, 6 months after it happened. At the time, I was worried maybe he was sexually assaulted. The only thing I knew was that his pants were down and someone took a photo. I didn't know how the pants got down, if someone had touched him, or if the photos were shared. The school denied being notified, and then when I supplied them with written proof of their acknowledgement, they told me the person handling it was no longer with New Milford. And to this day, there's been no resolution, no apology, no acceptance of guilt in the failure to protect my child. Holly's son Josh was able to tell you about what happened to him. He was able to tell her about it and about how he was feeling. But my one son is almost nonverbal. He cannot tell me if he's being abused by fellow students. And the other son can't find the words to explain it all. And neither can voice how it hurts their hearts to be treated this way. They can't tell me. I filed a police report. The bully was questioned by the police, and he denied doing it, so I could not press charges. Are there pictures of my son in his underwear on a website somewhere? I have no idea.
Jesus.
Can you imagine what it's like to send your children to school knowing that something like this happened and they were not protected by the school? I have no way of knowing if other things have happened. My kids can't tell me. They were moved from their bus and placed in a van, as if they were guilty. And unfortunately, I need to accept the segregation of my special needs children for the sake of their safety. It's the only way I know that they're going to be safe is if they're separated.
Yep.
And it just doesn't seem fair. Is this our new Milford? Is this who we want to be? This is an ongoing problem. It may be one of the first times it's discussed here, but I know the mayor knows, the police know, the youth agency knows. Everyone knows there's a problem, especially at Schaghticoke, and I don't feel like anything's being done to fix it. Thank you.
All right, so now for some stuff you guys aren't going to like. Autism runs in my family. I'm very familiar with it. We have varying degrees of autism depending on which member of my family you want to talk to, right? It is a spectrum, and my family's got dots throughout that spectrum. I hate to say this, but what the research has demonstrated and what you guys are seeing right now, I don't know how severely handicapped her son is. I'm not going to speak to that one specifically. But in general terms, the severely mentally handicapped can't be in system. There's just no way for us to handle that in system. You need an institution that's specific to that need. I hate to say it, but you need to have something like Fairfield Hills, and these kids need to be institutionalized. I really hate to say it. Not hers necessarily, but when it comes to the severely mentally handicapped, the folks that are wheelchair bound will never learn language and have to be spoon fed, and will have diapers until the day they die. These kids can't be in system. I'll also say that what you're supposed to do, if you're going to be working within what works in the four walls of the classroom, I told you, like 80 to 90% of what predicts educational outcomes is in the home and not in the classroom, or at least is outside the classroom. In her case, she's a mother, and as a parent, the one duty you have, if nothing else, is to ensure the physical safety of your kids. End of story. Provide basic nutrition, and protect them. Feed them, protect them. Provide that level of security. That is on you to do. And unfortunately, what that means is that when you're dealing with public schools, that's necessarily not going to be something that's going to be best. It's a top-down system. It's not bottom-up. So it's not going to cater to individual students in a certain degree, which means that the exact level of security that you're going to want for your kids is a decision you're going to have to make. Now, I would argue that one of the things that could be happening at the state level that would make this incredibly easy is to allow for inter-district exchange of students. To do what Patty Erickson said. If you want to go to Chappaqua High School, why do you have to jump through colossal hoops to make that happen if you live in New Milford? If folks want to come to New Milford to send their kids to school here, pay tuition. We'll vet them to make sure that they aren't a behavior problem, and then you pay tuition. And then the best way to break up the classrooms is you have to divide for aptitude. I hate to say it. But it's just what the research demonstrates. If you have 5 second grade classrooms, one of them should be in either genius or advanced placement, or however you want to call it, classroom. You have 3 normie classrooms, and then 1, let's call it remedial classroom. And just match the bell curve. And I hate to say it, but these severely mentally handicapped are going to have to be removed from that system. And you're going to have an institution that caters to that. Now, I'm in favor of if we have another Fairfield Hills, a regional system that reemerges in response to all this, or some sort of alternative learning center that emerges in response to all this for the severely handicapped. I'm in favor of sending that money to that institution from New Milford if that's what it takes. I hate to say, but when it comes to the severely handicapped, you do have to segregate them. And by the way, this level of segregation when it comes to aptitude in the classroom for educational outcomes is a good thing. It is highly predictive of educational outcomes when we're comparing to what you can do within the 4 walls of the classroom. Right? You don't want to have everybody just barfed into the same classroom. You don't want to have just like go through the alphabet and that's how we're going to go through the system. You don't want to have names drawn from a hat. The single biggest predictor of educational outcomes in the classroom, believe it or not, is freedom. So in that case, what you would want is not only to not have just names getting drawn out of a hat, but you'd want to have the freedom in the classroom for a teacher to say, for Mrs. Jones to tell Timmy's parents, little Timmy's parents, Timmy really shouldn't be in my class. Timmy should be in Mrs. Smith's class. Right? Timmy is being a little bit of a behavior problem because he's clearly way ahead of everyone else in the classroom. So Timmy needs to be in Mrs. Smith's class. And you can do that. And as a parent, you can say to the teacher, you know what, Mrs. Jones, Timmy shouldn't be in your classroom. He should be in Mrs. Smith's classroom. If you have that freedom. And the teachers then have that freedom to gear their curricula to whatever the individual needs are of the students within the classroom. This is much more of a bottom-up system than the top-down system that is universal within public schooling and is a necessary byproduct of it. So, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's just how that's just a tough it's a tough pill to swallow, but that's the reality on the ground. And by the way, I don't know how on earth there's no enforcement of the phone policy. I actually do know, because I'm the cynic in the room. And that is, nobody wants to touch the kids. Nobody wants to touch the phones because they know the minute you even breathe on them, if you fart in their general direction, the town is just going to go under in a lawsuit. And by the way, again, the solution to this is to not have the kids in the public schooling system in the first place. And the way you make that happen is through the voucher program. This is what I was saying when it came to the ARPA funds, right? Like, when it came to the ARPA funds, we had $7.9 million, which to me, the 30,000-foot view was just stealing. It was just larceny. So what should happen with that money is you should just write checks to the taxpayers of New Milford, but you can't do that. So through all of the litany of things you can't do, the thing that I came up with that was closest to just writing checks back to the taxpayers was to basically to use that money as seed money for a 501c3 separate from the town that then uses that, however they're going to use it, to issue things like homeschool vouchers, to issue grants for homeschooling, to make that decision easier for you folks at home. I would imagine there are a lot of moms that would love to spend their days with their kids. I would imagine there are a lot of moms that know how to do basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, right? And can get their kids through at least third grade worth of education. And when it comes to homeschooling, what you wind up with, what the data has demonstrated, is that the single best way to teach your kids in terms of educational outcomes universally is homeschooling. There is a reason that when you watch the Scripps Spelling Bee, all of the champions, anyone in the top 5, is going to be homeschooled. All of them are. And it's because the single biggest predictor of educational outcomes is parental involvement. And you can't get more parentally involved than homeschooling. And if you've got 3 kids in the school system, would it make it easier for you if you had just shy of $60,000 after taxes more to say, you know what, we're going to make this happen? Right? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe dad's the one that stays home. But we're going to make this happen. And maybe if dad stays home and watches the 3 kids, maybe the neighbors call up and say, we don't have time to do this. But would you be willing to take on, our 2 kids for this homeschool program? And you get neighborhood school programs. Again, emerge ground up, bottom up. This whole ordeal is just speaking to homeschooling and vouchers. I've never heard a better case for vouchers than the case that you guys are making in these public commentary. Right? Like it shouldn't have to come to this, but this is where we are. This is where we are. And quite frankly, I know I'm the cynic in the room, but this is not going to get resolved anytime soon. You're better off pulling your kids out of the system. And quite frankly, what's going to happen is if we've had our enrollment declining for like 15 years every year, and we're projected to continue on that decline. There's been a tiny little increase. There's been a little tiny bit of a bump over the last year or two because of people moving from Danbury to New Milford as a result of COVID hardships, let's say. That's a one-time bump that was predicted by the company that produced that enrollment study that we went over in pedantic detail on this show. If instead of there being 3,600 next year, if instead of it being 3,500 next year, what if we had 3,000 students pull out of system? What if all of a sudden the enrollment went from 3,600 to 600? Then what? For those that are sick and tired of that dollar amount on the Milford Public Schools side of the budget constantly going up, even though enrollment's going down, and we had to shut down an entire school, and the maintenance for the public for East Street School is getting handed back over to the town. Like, at what point, if there were only 600 kids enrolled in the system, would this be a $71 million budget? Would you have more money in your pocket because of far fewer taxes? What would happen with businesses around town, around the area, looking for places to relocate? What happens when their tax bill becomes significantly less as a result of that? So yes, I am advocating right now for everyone to just simply pull their kids out of the program. I'd be happy to put kids in touch, folks in touch with my friend Spencer Lord over at Education Without Walls. I'd be happy to start organizing groups where we have some sort of expertise as to how to go about finding ways to educate what would wind up being like 3,000 kids at a community level. By the way, this is already happening. This isn't my idea. This isn't my brilliant idea. This is already happening. There are places, especially across the Great Plains and Midwest, where you're already having these little tiny neighborhood schools pop up from kids being pulled out of system and just parents saying, we're done. We're homeschooling. And the response sometimes is, well, what happens to the kids that get left in the public school system? Well, then they get left with what's left. And everyone else gets much better served. The goal is to educate the kids, period. That doesn't have to happen through public schooling. And if that means that teachers wind up getting laid off, that means teachers wind up getting laid off. Again, the goal is to educate the students. That's it. So some hard pills to swallow. And my sympathy goes out to these parents. Especially, I think her name was Janet? I'm sorry if I got the last speaker. Like, sexual abuse absolutely happens in the middle school ages. It absolutely, there was a well-known incident at the time when I was attending in New Milford, when I was attending Schaghticoke Middle School, where there absolutely was a sexual assault, a pretty gross and disturbing sexual assault. But again, back then there were mechanisms to deal with that. Now we have restorative justice, which is not justice. And so like, my sympathy goes out to her. Like, there's very few things that are more detrimental to a child's mental stability than sexual assault. Now, again, when it comes to words, we're going to look at that through kind of a lens of like, well, sticks and stones. But we're not really talking too much about words here. We're talking about physical abuse. We're talking about what could be a full-on felony. But we don't know. We don't know because there's no way for her kids to report that directly, or her son at least to report that directly. And yeah, my God, do I have sympathy for her when the school system doesn't inform her about things that they know about that are going on. If that's really the case, man, that is a critical failure of the system. But that, again, is a systemic problem. That's a problem from within the system. I guarantee you that's not just one rotten egg. Because even if it is one rotten egg, the system exists to protect that rotten egg. You have the strongest union in all of the world's existence defending these teachers to the hilt. Which is why the only way you can get a teacher fired at this point is for a teacher to be caught diddling a student. That shouldn't be the case. When it comes time to lay teachers off because there's just significantly fewer students enrolled, it shouldn't be going by mere number of years in system. It should be going by some sort of metric where you measure the actual quality of output. Again, I don't like to name names when I'm attacking somebody's character, but I will name names when it comes to time to laud character. It is a crying shame that in 7th grade when I was attending in Schaghticoke Middle School, only a quarter of the students got to have Debbie Marsicano for their science teacher. She was the best. She was the best. And man, it would have been nice for her to have had the opportunity to teach more students. By the way, that's an argument in favor of increasing class size so that she has more students that are being taught by her and not someone else. And again, that's not to denigrate anyone else's name who was in the system at the time, but This is what you wind up with. This is a systemic problem. This is a problem of the system. And again, it's just necessarily not going to get resolved in system. Her name was Tracy. Thank you, Holly. Holly has corrected me twice now on the show. So apologies to Tracy since I got your name wrong. Thank you, Holly. Pat Erickson. Dr. Tracy made our system 100% inclusive, and our teachers were not equipped to provide the intensive care that is needed. 100% true. They took away the gifted program in the system, which is a crying shame, which speaks to the exact opposite of what I said. The universally has been demonstrated to work. All of the data, all of it, says that this is what you have to do in system. All of it says you have, again, a classroom of gifted and talented, or AP, or however you want to call it, 3 normies, 1, one remedial. And then, I'm sorry, but the severely mentally handicapped have to come out of the system. I know many teachers that left the system because they said they couldn't teach under the circumstances. No kidding. I can't tell you how many teachers I spoke with during COVID that were like, this is insane, we're out, and just retired because of what's happening during COVID, right? Like, the requirements that were being put in place, the kids weren't learning. They weren't learning. You plop a 10-year-old in front of a laptop, what do you think the 10-year-old's going to do? South Park had an episode about this where they spoofed it, where Eric Cartman went like this, pretended like he was losing his signal, right? And then took a photo of himself that he had taken from his webcam and just slid it over and then walked away from his computer. So it looked like he was all, timed out. This is what these kids will do. I was 10 once. I was 11 once. I was 12 once. You do everything you can to get out of having to sit through class. Which is why, again, out of school suspension for 1 or 2 days is just recess. It's just an incredibly long recess. Like, of course they're not going to see it as a punishment. Let's continue on.
Beth Basher.
Beth, we're going to get this one right.
My name is Beth Basher, and I live at 1 Brushy Hill. When is enough enough? When is it enough when you see your kids coming off the bus without a smile? When is it enough when you hear the stories repeatedly from one specific class with specific children disrupting learning? Why do the students feel it's okay to rummage through other kids' school bags and think it's okay? Is learning being done, or is it about survival at this point? Why is this being allowed? When is it enough when your kids have to be held up by a parent because they are afraid of being killed in the hallway? Or being jumped in the hallway by kids their age? And they want to kill you, and they actually said, I want to kill you. Throwing food, throwing objects that could hurt, could bleed. When is it enough when your kids don't want to walk into school because of fear of their peers? What about their safety? You're a fat, ugly, fill in the word. You're so fat, why are you breathing? Or just some of the comments I hear from my kids when they tell me about their day. When is enough enough? Kids are at a sensitive age with body images, self-esteem issues, confidence, finding out who they are and trying to leave a footprint on this earth. They won't be able to do this if this continues. This is the time to support each other and not hurt each other. Respect is not practiced in this school, especially when it comes to their teachers and peers. It's disgusting. I ask again, when is enough enough? This whole year, I have been hearing stories of bullying, harassment, and so on, wiping tears, holding my daughters tighter and longer, making them know they feel they are loved and safe. I'll ask you this. Is the school safe when your sons, daughters, or the children you have guardianship over have all this aforementioned? Nope. What can be done? What needs to be done? Computers have taken over learning, which is a shame. As a former special ed and mainstream teacher during the pandemic, I did the most I could without the screen. Why can't we limit computers now? What's wrong with paper and pencil? It takes a village to raise children, and it takes partnerships to make it all happen. Administration needs to be stronger, and parents should work with them to achieve a safe goal. Consequences need to be implemented and followed through more tightly. I understand they are limited on what can be done, but obviously what's been happening is not working to make Schaghticoke Middle School a better school, nor the environment. I didn't have any issues with New Milford until this year, and it's disgusting. I have been on the phone with administration almost 2 to 3 times a week, reporting something that happened to my children directly. I am sick of it. This is a school, a place for learning, and instead, I feel it's a place to learn how to survive. Just a few weeks ago, a young girl committed suicide in New Jersey because of bullying, something that is coming the new norm, just like lockdowns, just like staying in place practices. When is enough enough? The young girl who was tormented in her school from peers recorded her physical fight on social media. She was 15 years of age, which isn't that much older than these students of Schaghticoke Middle School. A parent of New Milford removed her child because of bullying from Sarah Noble Intermediate School. What needs to happen before a suicide or even more kids are pulled out? Mental health. Highly motivated and skilled mental health advocates need to be readily available to these children. The school needs to provide this service to those who need it. With not providing something like this could promote another suicide. And I ask again, when is enough enough? Thank you.
Okay, that was Beth. I told you we're gonna get one right. We're gonna get at least one name right. So there's some interesting things that Beth did there. First things first, before we get started, let me know how the video and audio is from this video that we're watching here tonight. If it's coming through nicely for you guys. There was some desyncing of the video to the audio. Just let me know if you guys saw that. I can drop the link to the original file. Here, let me drop the link to the original video. Again, what you're watching is one that I put some major effort into cleaning up so that we could actually watch it and be able to hear everything and not hear, a loud, in the background. So just let me know how that's going for you guys at home. There were some cool things that Beth did there. I'm going to disagree with. First things first, I'm not one to complain without providing a solution. And I've talked tonight about what these solutions are, right? So it's cool to see Beth go up to the podium and tell her story and also at least attempt to produce some solutions. Now, the problem, of course, I'm gonna say some things. Let's talk about the good ones that she suggested first. Pen and paper in the classroom. My God, if you were homeschooling your kids, would you have your 9 and 10-year-olds plopped in front of a computer? No, of course not. No, of course not. If you were teaching your 9 and 10-year-olds and you were given money to buy something large to write on, to instruct with, your 11-year-olds, your 12-year-olds, would it be a chalkboard? Would it be at least a dry erase board? Or would it be a smart board? Would it be a television? Would it be a smart TV? This is 100% true. Like the physical act of holding the pen and holding the paper, there's something to that. There's something that connects in the brain when you're doing that goes beyond typing into a computer. And by the way, a huge part of why vision problems emerge in a lot of kids is because of the amount of time that they're staring at a screen. And it has nothing to do with the screen itself and everything to do with, if I'm staring at these screens are only 2 or 3 feet away from me, right? So my eyes only are focusing on a very narrow depth of field, a foot to 3 feet in front of me. Whereas if you spend that time outside, there's a lot of depth of field to the great outdoors that you're not getting with the screen. That too, and you're also having huge amounts of artificial brightness. And with those screens, you have the artificial brightness contrasted behind it with kind of darkness. And that's not good for the eyes. You really want to be testing those rods and cones, right? You really want to actually be exercising the muscles, the tiny muscles around your eyes that do things like manipulate the size of your pupil and manipulate the size of your lens and how things work within the eye. So Yeah, like I have no idea why anyone under the high school age has a computer in the classroom outside of what the teacher has. Or outside of the computer laboratories in the first place. Like, there's zero reason for 8-year-olds to have Chromebooks in their laps. I don't know if this is what's happening in the school system, but again, this is a systemic issue, because what's going to wind up happening is you're going to get somebody complain that the 11-year-olds have Chromebooks and are being given these Chromebooks by the school, but my 9-year-old didn't get one. My 9-year-old needs to learn this. My 11-year-old gets the Chromebook. Why doesn't my 9-year-old get the Chromebook? And again, when you have a system that's bottom up, if that teacher was teaching at home, if that mom was teaching her kids at home, was doing the teaching herself, she could make that decision to plop her kids in front of a computer all day, which I think is a terrible way to teach. I think it's a terrible way for kids to grow up. It's just parked in front of a screen. And by the way, I said I would name names if I'm gonna be lauding them. This is a huge part of why I laud Diane Swanson and what she does over at the Pratt Center, because those kids are outside all day, pretty much no matter the weather, and she lets them get away with kind of some stuff that you might not think you would. You know, when she was I don't want to get Diane in trouble, but things like boys climbing trees, things like boys playing in the mud, things like, girls glumping around in puddles and getting soaking wet because of it. It's a completely different way that they do what they do in terms of education over at the Pratt Center, and I got to laud her for that, because that's a really not only a cool way to do things, but it actually comports with what the data say about what you can do in the classroom. And it really the fact that kids are being like completely removed from the real world with these virtual experiences can't possibly be helpful for their socialization into the rest of the world. Pen and paper is a real thing that should be used, absolutely, in the classroom. Absolutely, there should be actual chalkboards in the classroom, or at the very least, dry erase boards. Now, there are some things that Beth said that are kind of not in line with what the data demonstrate, or at least are just approaching it from the wrong way, from the wrong direction. So she said there should be mental health services provided in these school systems. This is spaghetti code. So spaghetti code is, let's say you're building you're doing programming, you're writing code, and you find that you do to test the software, and that software has some glitch in it, some bug. And instead of finding what the underlying problem is, maybe it's a user experience thing where, everything works, but it's kind of janky and awful and unintuitive. Instead of fixing the actual problem, what you do is you build code on top of it. You pile code on top of that to go back and ameliorate whatever that problem is. Ad hoc. Right? Instead of digging into the code, going line by line and finding out where that problem is, finding where that endless loop is, right? That open loop, and closing it is, or finding out the subroutines that are not really helping your system and getting rid of them and building an entirely new system, Windows, Windows. This is what this is going to be doing. The root of the problem is the system itself. So feeding more stuff into the system is just spending money. That's all it's going to do. So what really should be done when it comes to these like mental health issues is having some mechanism which allows for the parents to have more involvement in that. Again, this is yet another case for vouchers. This is yet another case for simply pulling your kids out of the system. You're asking for a market solution, a market response to a market influence, and public schools are necessarily shielded from that. And again, for those tuning in that are tuning in late, this isn't to denigrate the Board of Education here in New Milford or the members on that Board of Education. This is necessarily endemic to the notion of public schools. It doesn't matter who's on the Board of Ed. It doesn't matter how it's all constructed. The fact that it's public means you're going to be having these system-level problems. And the other thing I'll say very briefly is that I would caution against holding someone hostage to suicide. So if I were to say, Pat's in the chat. I know she's cool about this. Pat, I need you to give me a candy bar or I'm going to commit suicide. If I meant that, Pat shouldn't respond just with a no. Pat should go on one step beyond that and be like, whoa. Why are you doing this in the first place? right? So when you're dealing with somebody who's if what you're dealing with is do these things where a whole bunch of kids are going to be committing suicide. Well, pause. Why would they be committing suicide in the first place? Pause. Right? So I'm not accusing Beth of doing that, but I would be very cautious about using these examples for to achieve a certain particular end. Let's go on to the next speaker. That was good though. I like that Beth at least put together, not just a this thing sucks, but also a here's how to fix it. Even though I don't agree with how she recommended fixing it. Paul says, audio and video good. Cool. Pat Erickson, kids can no longer sign their names. Yes. This is actually interesting. So this was revealed at the joint budget hearing on Thursday night. All of the things that kids are just like demonstrating that they can't do nowadays. Part of it is because of COVID, right? But part of it is that, and this is if you get anything out of tonight's show, this is the part to clip. You ready for this? It is a shame. It is a crying shame that the way parents treat public schooling is as free daycare, but that's the reality. That's the world we live in. This is why so many teachers at all levels say that like 80 to 90% of their job is just being a babysitter. But hey, that's the reality. Yeah, I mean, like she said they were apparently kids are having trouble just so much as late as the 8th grade, introducing themselves, shaking someone's hand. Right? Kids are as a rule having serious problems with that. Really, really basic stuff. And yeah, I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I really hate to see what this generation of kids, what we're going to have done to this generation of kids once they become adults. Those 2 years of COVID where we kept them out of the classroom or had the virtual classroom or had the hybrid situation or forced kids to like go into school with very young kids that are not. I can say it now. I can say it now, YouTube. I can say it, Wojcicki, because Anthony Fauci said it. So now I can say it, right? Very young kids are not at great risk to the serious outcomes of COVID. There is absolutely no reason to force, kindergartners to be wearing masks in the classroom. Why do you think these language problems are emerging at these age groups that when they never emerged before and all of a sudden it's falling off of a cliff? Those 2 years of what we did to those kids were the worst thing we've ever done. There were certain locations, certain localities that said, we got to keep the kids in the system. We got to keep the kids in school. We're not shutting down. We're not forcing them the mask. We don't care if they're vaccinated or not because they're kids. They'll be fine. Again, Anthony Fauci has finally said this. The CDC is finally on board with this. So I can say this, you two. You can't kick me off for saying that. But yeah. Let's go to the next one. Cameron, okay. Okay. Sorry, guys. Had my own. Wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Snow Show without a technical difficulty. Okay, so I paused because these are clearly kids. These are clearly underage kids, and I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube and Facebook. So let me know in the commentary if you want to at least hear this. We should be able to get away with audio. It's not going to be illegal because what they did was they spoke before public comment. So folks know at home, we're going to take just a quick pause. Let me know in the comments if you want to see video, if you want to hear audio from these kids. Again, it's not going to be illegal for me to do it because it's entered into the public domain. But I don't want to get in trouble with Facebook or YouTube. So just let me know if you want to hear this, if you want me to skip through it. I really don't want to skip through it. I think we should be able to get away with at least audio. So when you go to public comment, before the Board of Finance, before Town Council, before Board of Education, before any of these public boards and commissions, and you speak in the meeting, before at the podium, let's say, during public comment, whatever is captured of your public comment, whatever it goes into the record becomes of public record, which means that the video that's produced by Taylor Media at Town Council meetings is immediately of public record, which means it's immediately of public domain, which is why I'm able to get away with what I've been doing. Holly, yes, they are worth listening to. They are the ones suffering. Again, I want to do this, but I want to make sure you guys are on board too. Yes, use audio, please. All right, well then here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get the audio going, and we're not going to have them on screen just because, again, they're kids, and I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. YouTube doesn't like having kids on screen without me jumping through hoops. So let's just go with audio.
I'm Cameron Basher. I live at 1 Brushy Hill Lane. Every day, people have thoughts about committing suicide because of bullying. Some kids decide they have finally had enough and end their lives. Those could be kids at our school if we continue the way we have been going. We need to fix this problem found in so many schools. There are so many kids at our school being tormented because of race, sexuality, mental disorders, or skin color. And my friends and I have been called names so awful I can't repeat them. But the worst part is that we can't fight back because we get in trouble. There's only so much that we can take before we break. We report it to teacher after teacher and nothing gets done. It's not that they don't try to do anything, it's just the fact that the kids just end up behaving worse after. They get a talking to and go right back to doing the same thing over and over, even worse. I have grown so used to being teased and treated awfully that it can no longer be okay, not that it ever should have been. There have been days where I almost don't want to get out of bed because I do not feel safe. Mental abuse is just as bad as physical abuse because it leaves scars that never heal. Just because some kids don't show it doesn't mean that they aren't hurting inside. So I ask you, when will enough be just that? Enough. I don't think we can continue on like this, and I don't think you do either. We can break, and when we do, we will be disciplined because we disrupted the class, or misbehaved, or we were too loud. How is that fair? The rest of the other kids that are actually doing it, they're shouting profanities across the room. Please fix this so that nobody at Schaghticoke Middle School has to end their life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like one of the things that kids are useful for when it comes to these type of speeches is letting you know like the mentality that they're living through, right? So it absolutely is true that like when a kid, when the proverbial bully, just gets to talking to, it just instigates them. It just makes things worse, and right. And again, I understand why it's frustrating. Like that, if I was a kid in that age group and somebody was trying to beat me up, I would fight back, and this would turn into a bloodbath. It would turn into a bloodbath, and one of us is walking away, right? Just because that's how I was, right? I won't start a fight, but I damn well will end it. So. And that was something I grew up with in like 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Now, Tom Esposito, if you're watching, like, no, you should not be. The solution to these problems isn't teach the kids to fight and then have more violence, right? That's not the solution here. The solution is these kids have to get out of the system. And if the system isn't going to pull these kids out, then you have to pull yours out. It sucks that that's the case, but that's where we are. Right. And yeah, no, there was a time in the 90s where if you were acting in obvious self-defense, you got pulled aside and said, all right, like, just so you understand, the reason why we're not punishing you is because you acted in self-defense. Do you understand the difference? Right. But nowadays they don't look at things like that. Nowadays, again, it's a blanket system. Nowadays, things like social emotional learning and restorative justice say that, using euphemisms, absolutisms like violence is never the answer. I'm sorry, but when somebody is shooting up a school, for example, violence is the answer. You shoot the guy in the head, right? If that's what it takes to stop violence, then sometimes you have to do that. So one of the things that I would love to see stop being taught kids are these absolutisms like violence is never the answer. Violence is a last resort. How about that? Violence is a last resort. Everything is better than violence until you get to violence and there's no other choice. Every other choice is a better choice. But when you don't have any choice, you don't have any choice. So, yeah, I really sympathize with these kids because they can't fight back. They can't, right? Like imagine being in that situation. Imagine being in that catch-22. If I fight back, I'm going to get in trouble. If I don't fight back, I'm going to get my ass kicked. God, this sounds like something out of Animal Farm. Seriously. But this is a system level problem. It's just not going to get resolved within system. I wonder how much bullying those poor kids would have to face in their own home. When mom and dad are right there, and mom and dad don't mind grabbing a kid by the collar and ripping the kid off, ripping one boy off of the other, right? And hurling them across the room so that they don't wind up killing each other. That's what dad's for. As far as I can tell. If dad does nothing else, that's what dad's for. To be there, to be the big, strong man in the room and say, no, we're done. So, yeah. Major sympathies with those kids. And again, gotta laud them because it takes guts to go up there. And I purposely put a censor bar over the thing because, again, YouTube doesn't like kids on videos. So, forgive me, but at least we got their audio, and that's what matters. And you may not have been able to see it, but they came in with a written speech. So kudos. Kids, if you're going to speak before the podium, pen, paper, write it down. Write it down, go to the bathroom, sit in front of the mirror, practice it. Make sure you got your watch on to make sure that you're under your however many, I think we're given 5 minutes for this meeting. So kudos to those kids. I'm not normally a fan of kids getting involved in politics, but this is a rare case where what they did was present the mentality, which is going to be very difficult to relate to if you've forgotten how kids operate in their minds. Right? What was very useful was for them saying, listen, these kids that are the problem, what we're doing is just, they're not going to respond the way that the proponents of things like social emotional learning and restorative justice suggest. It's going to be the exact opposite. You're just going to make them matter. And if what you're doing by have these sit down fireside conversations with them is making them worse, then you have to stop that. But hey, that means you got to tear down the entire restorative justice system, and you got to tear down the entire ethos behind that and social emotional learning. And again, that's a system level problem that isn't going to get resolved in system. Yet another case that you guys are making right now for vouchers and homeschooling. Or at least, if you're going to go with vouchers, finding another school.
Erin Haynes, please.
Hi, my name is Erin Haynes. I live at 19 Greenview Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am both a parent of a fourth grader at Sarah Noble, Isaiah.
Holy crap. Okay, this is brutal. We're taking a pause. We'll rewind a little bit. Holly, my son, so Holly was the one that spoke at the very beginning. Holly, my son was a red black belt in Taekwondo. So first things first, so folks know, Taekwondo is a legitimate martial arts. It's not, what was the one, I don't know what the martial arts that Steven Seagal did, but Taekwondo is a legitimate martial art. And red black is very high up in those ranks. The school told us if he fought back, not only would he get punished, the police would consider his training a weapon, and it would cause him to get in bigger trouble. This is why he didn't fight back. Again, this is a system level problem. It's bled into the police department. It's bled into the justice system at the state level, apparently. Because if that's the case, then the only reason they're doing that is because the state is telling them they have to do that. Because there's some sort of either legislative or precedential rationale for doing so. Either the courts have ruled that this is how we're going to interpret the law, or this is the law. Again, this is a system level problem. And again, you're not going to resolve this in system if it's a system level problem. And for those that are watching, yes, I will 100%, if this is what it takes and what you guys are on board with, I will 100% organize what's effectively a walkout. Right? I will absolutely organize for you, with and for you guys, a way to pull out hundreds of kids from the system, if not thousands, all at once, and find a way to get these things worked out. I don't know if this starts with some sort of like hearing where we get a general interest meeting where, maybe we rent out a huge hall and, all right, how are we going to make this happen without using the system? How are we going to be able to say, you know what? We have, let's say Jim over there. Jim over there has a math background that's incredibly far along. Let's rely on Jim to take some kids. Maybe Jim takes a day off from work once a week. Maybe Jim works from home because he's a software writer or something like that. So he can afford like a few hours a day maybe to take in some kids and do some math. Right? Maybe we rely on Val over at Val's Garage to take the 15, 16-year-olds, 2 days a week. And you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a free education in auto mechanics over at Val's Garage. And Val will happily take those kids on. And yeah, he might not be able to pay you, or if he's going to pay him a pittance. But at 15, 16 years old, like if you can read, write, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, there really isn't that much more you need to know and as far as mechanics are concerned. Right? Maybe I reach out to my friends, the Deeks over at Deek Electric, and they take on a couple of 15, 16, 17-year-olds as interns or something so that they can start getting their hours towards their E1. A totally vocational program at the higher age groups, right? Well, maybe totally, but introducing what would include a totally vocational program, which New Milford Public Schools can't do because the state makes it virtually impossible for them to do it. But if you just do it at home, you just do it at home. And then you enter the real world at the age of like 16, 17 with a real job, with real experience in something that pays well. Hell, I would do it. I own landscaping coming in this summer. I would 100% take on a bunch of 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are looking to get into that field. Yeah, there's not much that we would be able to do because we're kind of using dangerous equipment, and you got to kind of be 18 for my insurance to cover you. But, this is how this works out. So, guys, I don't know if there's going to be that much response. You guys all know how to reach out to me. The comments section isn't really a place for this, but let me know if that's how you guys want to go about this. And absolutely, I will organize the Milford Public School walkout where we have 100, 200, 300, 1,000 kids get pulled out of the system. We hold some general interest meetings. We find a way to make this happen because, again, it's not the system that matters. It's the education that matters. It doesn't have to happen in public schools. Let's rewind this a little bit because we kind of cut her off because I thought that was a really poignant point that Holly was bringing up.
Aaron Hayes?
Aaron Hayes, okay.
Haynes, please.
Haynes.
Hi, my name is Erin Haynes. I live at 19 Greenview Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am both a parent of a fourth grader at Sennello, Isaiah, and I'm also the music teacher at Hill and Plain School. Tonight I'm speaking primarily as a parent. However, as a teacher, I am always looking for ways to promote respect, acceptance, kindness, and inclusion among our students. I am here in support of these parents speaking out against bullying. I think their stories speak louder than anything else I could say, but I'm also here because my son is autistic with intellectual disabilities. And although we are fortunate not to have to deal with bullying yet, as far as I know, it's something I worry about more and more as he approaches middle school. I hear about our neighbors, some of his very best friends being bullied, and it's absolutely unacceptable. I stand in support of these boys and also for my son's future. My son has a very loving heart. He feels like everyone is his friend, but he has minimal verbal communication. I wouldn't change anything about him, but he would be a very easy target for a bully, and he would not be able to report it to us. Just doesn't have the speech and language to do that. I recently received an email that there have been inappropriate text message exchanges between students here at Sarah Noble. When I'm on the bus, getting them on and off, I hear bus drivers sternly telling students to put their phones away because they're not allowed to have their phones out on the bus. But it's still happening. I hear that much of the bullying that occurs, like we heard tonight, happens through text, airdrop, social media, phones, etc. My question is, what are we going to do about this? What kind of boundaries can we set around this that would make a difference? These students have tools in their hands that they are clearly not developmentally ready to handle responsibly. You know, I think it's not entirely their fault that they've been given these tools.
No, because their parents got them.
There's no accountability for how they're being used. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think we need to figure that out. I'm also wondering, what are we explicitly teaching students about acceptance and inclusion, especially in the older grades, but even in the primary schools where I teach? Are there things that we could do? Is there more that we could do to help young people understand the importance of kindness and respect and acceptance? And, you know, I think the mental health support, things are happening with that. I'm very supportive of that. I'm very grateful for that. But these are questions that really, really need to be answered. I have lots of questions and not a lot of answers, but I think we have to ask the questions and find answers to them if we are going to create a safe learning environment for all of our students. And I think that's priority number one. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Erin.
All right, that was Erin. Erin, there is a solution to this. And unfortunately, the system's not going to allow it. But I'm going to show it to you guys. I'm going to show it to you guys right now. Ready? It's really easy. We're going to do this. We're going to do this live. I just thought of this just now. We're going to do this. Trust me. This is going to work. It's going to work. This is really easy. You ready? Where's my Sharpie? You get your Sharpie. I'm going to try to do this so you guys can see it. And you go, phone. Right? I'm trying to do this so you guys can actually see it. Right? In a bucket. It says phone. Or phones. Sorry, I'm trying to go through this quickly. And the kids take their phone. And they throw it in the bucket. And it goes on the teacher's desk. Done. Done. Again. Unfortunately, at a system level, this is never going to fly. This is never going to fly. Bus drivers, if they have problems with kids playing with their phones, you pull the bus over, you go to the back of the bus, you rip their phones out of their hands, you get your phone bucket, phone goes in the bucket. You can take your phone on the way out. Or, better yet, when they're walking on the bus, you hold out the bucket, just like you're collecting tickets at a concert or something. In goes the phone. You don't put your phone in the bucket, you don't get on the bus. Unfortunately, these ridiculously easy and obvious solutions would be so unacceptable at the system level that they're never going to get implemented. And this is not me trying to come down Aaron's throat. I'm just showing to you guys that she's right, because I don't know what the solution is other than to pull kids out of the system. Because what I just suggested is so obvious, there's no way Aaron didn't think of that. Which means that the only reason that this isn't going to work is because it's not allowed. Which is which everyone knows this is the case. Paul, have phone holders in classroom wall. All students put phone on the wall at the beginning of class and pick them up on the way out. Do this in all classes. Phones are turned off. Yes, this is exactly what I'm saying. There is no thing, not one thing at the middle school level that those kids need those phones for in the classroom. Not one thing. And I would say that you are a bad parent if you give your kid a phone before they're turned like 15 years old. If they're not old enough to drive, do not give them a phone. And Aaron is 100% right. That kids, especially at the middle school level, are not socially prepared to handle what those tools allow them to do. Absolutely not. And there really isn't going to be a great way to resolve that problem. I remember the early days of the internet. I remember the late 90s internet and those chat rooms in the late 90s. Those places were soapboxes. Those places were sandboxes. They were absolute mud pits. If you thought what kids are seeing online today is abusive and bad, you have got to see what kids used to write in the late 1990s. This is just a facet of the fact that it's the internet. And it's such a serious, like, it's so embedded into the ethos, the spirit of the thing, that there is the meme of what are you, 13? Oh, you're just another 13-year-old on the internet, another 12-year-old on the internet, right? Whenever somebody puts some comment on, let's say, my YouTube videos that's unbelievably stupid. Oh, what are you, 12? Oh, you're just some 12-year-old. And like you've all seen the Call of Duty videos, I'm sure, where the way that they speak to each other in TeamSpeak, right? It's not really that significantly different because kids aren't different at that age, right? Like, what makes a 10-year-old a 10-year-old is still what makes a 10-year-old a 10-year-old. Paul, got a seat number? Your phone is in the holder with the seat number. Yeah, I mean, you don't even allow them in the classroom until they put your phone in the bucket. You don't get to come in the classroom until you do. And then on your way out, you can grab the phone. But unfortunately, the system just won't allow that to take place. There's some other things that she mentioned. I was trying to take notes as some of these. Oh, acceptance and inclusion. First things first, that stems from tolerance. So the idea was originally that you should tolerate certain things even though you don't like it. Acceptance is one step further. Acceptance is you are now forced to like the thing. So no, we should not be teaching acceptance. If you want to teach tolerance and say that you're going to draw a hard line and say that there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance, you don't have to like the thing, but you have to be tolerant of it. For example, I may not like that there are, let's say Democrats on the town council. Let's say I don't like that, right? But I still have to be tolerant of that fact, right? I still have to tolerate that that's the case. I may not like that I have to deal with certain people in terms of business, but I'm tolerant of that. I may not like that there are certain aspects of my job that kind of suck, right? When I was working in the cemetery, man, running a trimmer for 4 hours straight, it's just like running a trimmer until it runs out of gas and then filling it up and running a trimmer until it runs out of gas. That sucked, but I tolerated it. I didn't accept it. I tolerated it to get to the next thing because it was what we had to do. I wouldn't do it for free. I was the superintendent of Milford Center Cemetery for a price. If they paid me nothing, I absolutely definitely would not have had that job. Absolutely definitely not. So when it comes to inclusion too, this word has been manipulated to mean something it never meant until about 10 or 15 years ago. So I would really hesitate to have those as the standard here, right? Kindness, okay. Respectability, okay. Decency, okay. What was the other thing that we had here? Oh yeah, respect. So respect, first things first, is something you earn from someone else, and the ability to issue that respect is something you learn, and not in the classroom. You learn that from your parents. You learn that at an incredibly young age, right? That you have to do the thing before you get the reward for the thing, before you are treated like you did the thing. Respect is treating somebody like they've accomplished something worthy of that thing. Like they've accomplished something worthy of earning your respect. And then when you issue respect, it comes with kindness, decency, humility. It doesn't come necessarily with acceptance. It doesn't come with, necessarily inclusion. The NBA is a very exclusive organization. Only a handful of players ever get to see court time. Only a handful of human beings ever get to the NBA and see court time. Right? Like, incredibly exclusive community. Incredibly exclusive. Right? They're not going to allow me, and I'm 5'6", way out of shape, and I've never been good at ball. So no, I'm not going to be in the NBA ever. Right? Especially at my age. Like, maybe if I was 7 instead of 37, maybe I'd have a shot. But let's be honest, there have only been like 3 players in the NBA that were my height, and 2 of them could dunk. So not going to happen. And acceptance, right? Michael Jordan didn't accept, right? It did not accept that, let's say, he didn't accept that Charles Barkley got the 1993 MVP. In fact, he didn't accept it to a point where it became personal. And he used that as his motivation to go out and win the 1993 NBA title. Right? So that was maybe tolerance, maybe, but it definitely wasn't acceptance. So I would hesitate to frame things that way.
Is that it?
Do you want to make sure that someone else?
Megan, you want to speak?
Megan Bird's going to speak here in a minute.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but I feel I need to. So Megan Bird, 2 Carlson Road. I was the PTO president at Schaghticoke Middle School last year and the year before. I personally dealt with the situations at the dances. The same student who was not admitted in order to protect Holly's son did pre-register, did come to a dance last year, and a physical altercation broke out at the dance, at the very end of the dance, and he bolted and went home. His father was outside waiting for him already, but we did fill out a police report for it. It is a serious situation. And I just wanted to speak to it, the fact that it impacts not just those who are directly bullied. My children spent my son spent 6th grade at home remote because he was feeling anxiety due to COVID, and went back in 7th grade. And by the end of the year in 7th grade, was so disgusted and literally in tears sometimes in the car ride home, watching what was happening to his friends and feeling powerless to do anything about it, that he decided he was going to do something about it. He was going to start a student-led group, and he did his best to try and do that. It was at the very end of the year, so nothing got off the ground last year, but we were invited, as were other parents and students, to participate in the school climate committee, which I'm very thankful for, and we've been to every meeting since we were invited last spring. We've missed one. And this year, other students and a few other parents have started attending as well, but it's not a lot. And honestly, the school climate committee is not addressing the bullying problem. They have just started a student-led group, student-led club, or for change or something like that. Student Leaders for Change, I think is what they're calling it. But again, it shouldn't be up to the students to try and change their school. I mean, yes, they have a responsibility to participate in that change, absolutely, but it should be coming from above. I do think the new administration at the school this year is doing what they can, but the problem is severe, and it has been severe for many years. And I think it's gotten worse after COVID. I think a lot of students just don't know how to interact with anybody anymore after being at home for a couple of years and separated from the social situation. So they definitely need a little more help. And I felt I needed to say that. If anybody wants to talk to me about what I personally saw as PTO president, I'm happy to share that information. As Holly said, I did report it to the school and the district when it happened. So they were aware, but I know for a fact that the student is still repeat offending this year. It's a shame that he's not getting the help that he needs, because he clearly needs some help too.
That right there is your advocacy for restorative justice, which isn't justice. So no. Sorry, Megan, but that problem isn't going to get fixed in the system. He needs to have that problem fixed in the home. The overwhelming majority of educational outcomes come from within the home. The single best predictor for educational outcomes is parental involvement. And yet here we are with the biggest, she is probably the most vocal opposition to everything I've said tonight when it comes to things like homeschooling and voucher programs and getting rid of restorative justice and getting rid of the underlying principles and ethos and spirit of what has introduced things like social emotional learning. We're not going to talk about Thursday night. Paul, I know you're in the chat, but we're not going to talk about Thursday night. But let's continue.
So, and that's it for public comment. Oh, sure.
Does anyone else in public like to speak at this time? Yeah.
If you, absolutely, if you just want to go around to the podium, sure, of course.
Okay. Sarah DeLucia. Sorry.
Oops. Hang on, folks. Hang on, folks. We got to, I don't know how old she is. She looks like a student. So we're going to go ahead and put on the censor bar. All right. Sorry, I think her name was Susan DeLucia. Sorry, Susan, if you wanted to get on the show. YouTube doesn't like me showing kids, so we'll get audio.
Do you guys want to go first? Oh, go ahead.
It looks like her friends are coming to the podium. They look to be about her age. They're just filling out their names on the sign-in sheet. So folks know when you go to speak at public comment at all these meetings, you do have to show up a little early and sign your name. I think they were just told to not name names.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Basher. I live at One Bushy Hill. Okay.
Oh, by her mother. Okay.
So, but I've honestly experienced about.
Oh my God, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sarah DeLucia. She's 26. Okay, so we can have Sarah on. Thanks, Holly. Holly has been great about correcting me tonight. I've said 3 wrong things for sure that Holly's corrected me on. So these are her friends, and they don't look like they're adults. Mackenzie, I forgot what her last name was. I'm just gonna proceed with caution here. Holly, let me know if they're of age.
Bullying is that, I mean, honestly, and like, it's always in this one class. But like, I've always come home like saying like really like, really like negative. Like I've said nothing positive about that classroom, except for one thing maybe. But that's probably it. But one of my worst experience in that classroom is that I was in the classroom and we were just like, it was just a normal day. But these people decided not
okay,
to be
thanks, Holly.
so nice, and they just decided to just put hand sanitizer all over my clothes and all over my arms and stuff. And so I just couldn't like stand in that classroom, so I had to go out of the classroom. I was trying to look for like the teacher or something, but they were all busy, of course. But yeah, I have nothing else to say. That's all.
Hi, I'm Olivia Vanek. I live on 28 Maury Road, and Vanek, Vanak. And I just wanted to say, there's been a lot of things happening at school lately, and I really think we should, like, end this. So I really hope we can do all we can and help these kids, because I don't think anyone deserves to be treated like this. And especially, like, my friends and everyone in the school. So, yeah.
Thank you. Sarah DeLucia, 12 Palomino Drive. I wasn't really planning to speak, but I graduated in 2014, and my experience with bullying was awful. Like, I had the police involved. I had a projector screen put up of how ugly I was, all these photos of me. It was awful. I had extreme eating disorders. I had to leave school at 10 o'clock, all throughout high school. And I came to that school my sophomore year, so I was new. I was an easy target. And throughout, like, my entire high school experience, I was just sent to the guidance office. That was all that was done. If there were students in there, I just had to sit there. I was consistently yelled at by my principal. I don't think he's there anymore, but I was consistently yelled at by my principal that I wasn't in class enough, that I was always skipping school, and it just took my mom battling with the school system to, like, keep me out of school because of how severely bullied I was. I had
keep her out of school. Again, I mean, this is just yet another case for. It's her mom that is fixing these problems because the system won't do it. Anyways, I'm sorry, sir. I interrupted you.
Years, still do, of trauma that I'm still dealing with, and I'm 26 now. And I just feel as though hearing all of this tonight, it's crazy to me that it's still like this. I thought when I left, I was like, hopefully they'll do something about it, you know? And just hearing this tonight, I, like, had to say something, because I dealt with that for 3 years. It was awful, and I'm heartbroken hearing this now, and especially in 8th grade. You know what I mean? And I just really hope you guys take into consideration everything that everyone's saying, my experience that happened years ago, and just know that this issue is big. It's huge. And, like, that's it. I just really hope you guys understand the depth of it. Thank you.
Pat Erickson, I think our new superintendent will finally find solutions to some of these issues. I have not had any hope for our school system for at least 25 years. I'm glad these parents and students have come forward. Well, it's tough to say. I mean, she's been in the position for all of 7 days. And I didn't participate in the vetting process at all. This is part of why I haven't really talked much about the Board of Ed, because I haven't been paying much attention, quite frankly. So I don't like to talk on issues on which I'm not that well informed. So when it comes to the Board of Ed this year, especially when it comes to budget-related stuff, I haven't really been paying that much attention, so that's why I haven't really been talking about them. But I hate to be the cynic, Pat, but I don't think that a lot of these problems are going to get resolved at all, let alone anytime soon. And I don't think that's the superintendent's fault. I think it's just the fact that this system exists as a system.
Okay, my name's a long one. It's Laura Grassler Lockwood Blake. I come from a different point of view. 15 Sundance Road, New Milford. Come from a different point of view. I have a 6th grader at Schaghticoke right now. He is not currently being bullied. He's a white knighter. Every day he comes home, we get a phone call, we get a story from him where he stood in the middle. I don't know if you noticed the 6-foot blonde kid. That's my 12-year-old baby. He gets in the middle of these and tries to stop it. Then he misses class. We get a call that he missed assignments, that he got a little rough, which possible. My children are not angels. I have 4 other children who are adults now. They attended New Fairfield schools, middle school and high school, and Sherman Middle School and high school. We didn't have these problems at those schools. Granted, they're a bit older. They're 26, 27, and 30. But we didn't have these problems. The administration, the teachers, the vice principals were involved with the parents, with the bullying. There were repercussions. Granted, as parents, of course, we were not told of punishments or repercussions, but something was done to stop kids from picking on other kids.
It could be
something was done.
Kids.
We didn't have these stories every day. I don't believe this is strictly a COVID issue because Scotty was bullied in Northville. The principal handled it and it was stopped. And it was by a student who is currently bullying at Schaghticoke right now.
So what does that tell you? Again, it's this, I guarantee you, it's, you guys are, I said at the beginning of the show, I guarantee you it's the same 6 or 7 problem kids that are just the worst of all the rotten eggs. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, maybe there was some mitigation efforts in Northville Elementary School, but then he stayed a bully. So you got to pull him out. I'm sorry, these kids can't be in the system. I mean, this is what I said how many years ago now? You have to do this. I hate to use the S word, but like segregated systems when it comes to this sort of thing work. They work. Sorry, not sorry. And you absolutely should be able to judge somebody based on their behaviors. And that's what we're talking about here. So, and I'll also add to, she's also talking about different homes, like Sherman kids. I think she meant Chappaq because there's no Sherman High School. But like New Fairfield, middle and high school, I mean, we're talking about a completely different demographic.
Currently, and continues. So I would like to see, as a seasoned parent, some kind of information to the parents, some procedures or protocols. I spent a week talking to some friends of mine who are teachers in the school system and digging through paperwork to find out that the school board actually, or the district, I should say, actually has a hidden, like buried form where you can anonymously report bullying. None of the other parents I know knew that was there. Nothing has ever been sent to us that I have ever seen telling us what we can do about this. And it's known that it happens. So can't we work in partnership to help our children work together? Like I said, the other 2 school systems I have put children through didn't have these issues like I'm seeing at Schaghticoke and I'm hearing about at Schaghticoke. And that's it.
So yeah, so folks are aware, like this is an age thing and it's a demographic thing. It's because these problems are originating in the home that these problems are originating. And it's because these problems originate in the home that they are only going to get resolved in the home. And this is, again, it's a system level problem. The system isn't going to fix problems in the home. I think we got one more speaker here before we wrap things up.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Russell Newman, 19 Roundtable.
Great voice.
You heard from my wife and saw my son and heard about some of the horrific activities that happened at Schaghticoke Medical School. Thank you for mentioning the hidden form. When we asked for that form to report the bullying to go to the state, we were told that it didn't exist. We were told that there was no such form available. Just a little more history on what happened to Joshua. Right before we fully pulled him from the school, he was in the hallway with a principal, with a guidance counselor, with his mother. He saw a bully come across the hall. He said, "Quick, come into this empty room." He literally grabbed administrators and his mom to pull them out of the hallway because he was so terrified. One of the times that my wife did come into the school, he was punched as he was walking down the hallway to her. You know, there has been a lot of administration changes. I know that several administrators have left Schaghticoke. Some new ones have come in, some new thoughts and ideas. Perhaps some electronic monitoring. You know, I know that some school districts offer anything within the IP address, whether it's a school-based Chromebook or a personal device, can be monitored.
Oh boy.
Catchwords, major activities. That's something that absolutely should be in place. You know, certainly as photos of children are being taken inappropriately.
I have to stop and disagree. Take the phones away. We don't need to go into 1984 here tracking kids. Take the phones away. And if the school won't do it, you as parents have to do it. And if the other parents won't do it and the school won't do it, what's the other thing that can get removed? And that is your kids from the classroom. These are the type of things that we're going to get. Remember what I said about spaghetti code? These are the type of solutions that we're going to get, because this is how the system works, which is why the system is necessarily not going to get these problems resolved.
These are things that can be flagged and caught. Perhaps, I know the SROs do a lot of hard work with these kids, trying to straighten out the courses of a few of these kids. You know, perhaps not just guidance. Maybe, I don't know what other further steps they can take.
Handcuffs.
But I don't think that the children that are being tortured and beaten and harassed should be the ones affected by the leadership. I think the children causing the damage need to be separated, need to be taken out.
Yes.
I'm going to step away now. Thank you.
Thank you.
They should be separated. They should be taken out, and they should go. If they're committing serious crimes, we used to have this thing called juvenile hall. We used to have this thing called clink. Here come the cuffs into the back of the car with you. Right, like there was an incident when I was in school, when I was in elementary school, and I won't get into too much detail because there might be somebody watching who remembers this and can name names. But there was a fella when I was in 6th grade who stabbed one of the adults, we'll say one of the adults in the building, with a knife. That kid, when he tried to run out of the school at the age of 12, was tackled by police, was forcibly detained, had handcuffs thrown on him, was hurled into the back of a cop car, and taken to New Milford Police Department and held at New Milford Police Department after he was read his rights, and was held there until he was arraigned. That kid was expelled from school without an appeal, without a hearing. It was just, no, you stabbed this person. Out you go. Out you go. One and done. No remorse, and that kid was never allowed in New Milford Public Schools ever again. Not ever again. It was technically a program that was run through New Milford Public Schools at what was at I don't know where it was run at the time, but until very recently it was run at the East Street School, where there was one room that was set aside for these expelled handful of kids, and that was their classroom. These 6 or 7 kids, that was their classroom. And if you didn't like that, bye. Bye. Bye-bye. These kids are out of system. The solution to these problems that the SROs could be doing is handcuffs. But unfortunately, again, their hands, excuse the pun, are tied. And in a lot of these cases, if you so much as lay a finger on these kids, if they're not literally blowing up the school or going Columbine on the place, you're going to be in a world of trouble, especially as a cop, especially as an SRO. So, and again, these are not problems of the SROs. These are not even problems of the New Milford Police Department when in those places where the New Milford Police Department is providing those SROs. This is a problem that is built into the system. And therefore, unless you remove the kids from the system or get rid of the system, it's not going to get resolved. I know this is a really hard pill to swallow, but just like when we talked about, where is it? Yeah, this is the one I want. This is the one I want. Let me get the, I want this one. I want to get rid of that one. Just when I talked about what works and what doesn't work in the public classroom, what works and what doesn't work in public schools, just like when I brought that hand truck full of research on the matter before the Board of Finance, when everybody jumped down my throats over that. I'm sorry, but this is just this may be a hard pill to swallow, but it has to be. This is what works. So you guys have joined in. Thanks so much for joining in. Holly. Since it's unlikely that they will remove the technology, Russell is speaking of a software monitoring system that flag unsafe language, helps to catch cyberbullying. It's used at Chapag, and I would oppose it vehemently. Again, you have a solution here. We don't have to pile on to what's there. We have this subroutine where we know what the problem is. We have an open loop in this one subroutine, and all we have to do is close that loop. And it takes one word, end loop, or end if, and then you fill the criteria for end if. We don't have to have an entire software package to make up for that one closed loop. You get the bucket out, you get the basket out, however you want to do it, and you tell the kids, you come in the classroom, you put the phones in the bucket. On your way out, you can grab them. And if you don't like that, you don't have to be in the classroom. Bye. Right? You have the teachers on the bus. You have the bus drivers, on the bus. They have their bucket. Phones in the bucket. You don't like it? You don't have to get on the bus. Bye. But again, because this is a system level problem, the real way this gets resolved, because you know what kids are going to do. They're going to find some way to circumvent that. They're going to find some way to circumvent whatever this child tracker thing is. And on top of that, like, talk about dystopian. That's really what we're going to do here? Child tracker? I'm not a fan of that. By the way, child tracker I'm using it was a term from South Park from many, many years ago that was instituted in their schools. So I'm using it as kind of a rhetorical device. Pat Erickson, we still have juvenile court. Yes, I know. I'm saying, Pat, like I'm kind of being sarcastic when I refer to that thing. Like, of course we still have it today, but like we actually used it. We actually used it when I was in school. The major problems, again, were removed from the system. But now, we've adopted so many programs that are going to make it completely impossible to take that approach. I don't see it getting resolved in system. I just don't. And now I'm hoping y'all will get on board with what I've been saying for many, 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 many years now. Right? Like where these problems get resolved is in the home. And we all know it. And that's because the single best predictor of educational outcomes is parental involvement. 80 to 90% of what predicts educational outcomes is not within the four walls of the classroom. It's in the home. The thing that predicts educational outcomes within that little tiny bit that is within the four walls of the classroom is freedom in the classroom, which the system, by virtue of being the system that it is, necessarily opposes, necessarily rejects. This is what I was saying many years ago. Overall public spending on public education, K through 12, is not correlated with educational outcomes. And you know, we can go back to that video that I produced that had link after link after link after link. I had look at these citations. Like, I had an entire chapter of source citations at the end of this video. And instead of even paying any attention whatsoever to that literature that I provided many years ago, the room ridiculed me. So now that all of those things I said that were true and are now undeniably materializing, are you guys on board? Are we finally on the same page here? I sure hope so. But anyways, it's 9:15, and this has been the longest episode of the Mike Sennello Show. And like I said, it may well be the last, because 2 hours of me being furious is hard. It's a hard thing for me to do. It's mentally just eating at me every night that I have to deal with this. So I don't know. Maybe we'll come back. Maybe we won't. I do this for you guys, and I'm honestly grateful for everyone that chimes in, especially Holly tonight, who's been correcting me all night. Especially grateful to folks like like Ray Lillis and Paul Murphy and Pat Erickson, who have been regular viewers of the show. Again, I do this for you guys. Genuinely, eternally grateful. Ray, if you wind up watching this, reach out to me, man. Maybe there is some way for us to organize something of a general interest meeting for some sort of homeschooling system, or not really a homeschooling system, but a movement. You know, maybe we can talk about renting out Oddfellows, and we put together a presentation, and maybe get some people in the room that know more about this than I might. Because, you know, I've been wrong, and I'll be wrong again. I was wrong at least 3 times tonight. Holly corrected me. I will be wrong again. But, Pat, take a break. You need it. Yeah, it's going to be a long, long break probably. But, again, for all those who are watching at home, thanks so much for tuning in tonight and every night. I'll see you guys out in the next one if there is one. Good night, everybody.